Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back. You know the foundational difference between people who are successful and wealthy and those who aren't? The level of education. Wealthy children are educated about how finance works, whereas poor children are not educated on how finance works. People who are supposedly poor financially, socio-economically, they make monies. In fact, they're the biggest consumers. That's the only way the rich gets wealthy. But the thing is, they're not educated on how to use those monies. Wealthy parents teach their children how monies work. And thus generational wealth is built and preserved. To make money was one thing. To build the structure to put that money in is another thing. And then to preserve that structure and that money is a whole different game. The foundational difference between one who has and one who doesn't is the level of education. Tax avoidance and tax evasion. So one has owed back taxes, right? Or one anticipates incurring some type of liability that they've already performed, but it's going to come to them and bite them in the butt. Or one does not want to qualify for taxation. Two words that you ought to look into is tax avoidance and tax evasion. One is legal, and the latter is illegal. It is legal that it is all right to avoid tax. Not according to my words. It is illegal and it is not all right to evade tax. Not according to my words, but per the auditing company of the United States, which are third-party authorized representatives that handles the bookkeeping of the United States, its enclave subsidiaries, its partners, its persons, subjects, etc., etc. Here's their words. IRS Manual 25.1.1.3.3. Let's zoom this in. This is not my opinion, and this is not my personal conjecture. This publication was released on January 23rd, 2014. Avoidance versus evasion. Whenever we speak anything regarding trusts, foreign trusts, different types of trusts, the test, the standards, the elements, the intricacies of how it's done, certain use of certain forms, why you use it, the reference to the tax codes and the public laws, how it relates to business, how it relates to courts, how it relates to just commerce in general. What we're speaking of always, when I use this constant word to qualify for tax, to qualify for tax, to qualify for tax, it's this right here. When you properly place yourself in a proper jurisdiction that truly is deemed as being foreign, one way or another, you avoid it. When you don't do it, a taxable event is triggered. And upon the trigger of that taxable event, you then evade it. To evade something means you've already been put in danger or arm's way. And then it's after the fact. Avoidance means prevention is better than cure. There's an African proverb that says prevention is better than cure. These foundational principles is the same thing that applies on a monetary level. You don't put the seatbelt on after a car crash. You don't begin to drink water before you get thirsty. Same thing applies to monies. Avoidance is better than evasion. Avoidance is legal. Avoidance is so legal that within the language of either the public laws that statutize within the 26 USC and the 26 CFR, or within the manuals that instructs the employees to deal with certain types of people a certain way, which is what we're reading right here. Whenever you hear about the IRS manual, the manual is for the employees and executive to be able to use as a guidance when it comes to certain things, how they deal with it. Those people you call on the phone to get that 98 number, they're reading the IRS manual to determine what you qualify for and what you don't. The auditors, the commissioner, and the secretary uses the public laws to determine how they interface with you. That's another little jewel right there. But nonetheless, here's a manual, the guidelines that the peons use. But it's very important for you to know delineation. Because when you start reading res judicata regarding people who are liable for tax but didn't pay it, they would always use this term tax evasion, like Wesley Snipes, right? When you start to read things about trust and how they've pierced it, they will use the word tax evasion. And then they will subsequently use this word avoidance. There are many res judicata that says, well, if you know you didn't qualify for tax, you should have avoided it. And then they'll just leave it at that. But they will throw this word evasion over and over in a form of guilt. Yet they have manuals that basically tells you avoidance is legal, evasion is not legal. So much so they even create a specific section that deals with the difference. 25.1.1.3.3, avoidance versus evasion. Avoidance of tax is not a criminal offense. Avoidance of tax is not a criminal offense. This is not your own personal perspective. This is not my personal perspective. This is IRS manual with a reference to this. In the future, we'll go over how you can get certified copies of this in the location where you can request it from. But their manual is telling you it's not an offense for you to avoid taxation. Why? Because it's all about qualification. It's like walking down the street or driving down a road and you see someone behaving erratically or traveling down that road all ridiculous and crazy as though they own the road. Instead of you getting into any type of situation with them, you casually go to the other side of the road and go your own way. Not because you're afraid, but you just know that prevention is better than cure. Not that when things come down to you, you can't stand up for yourself, but just why waste your time with that? You have better things to do. But what if you did not even know that that other guy coming down the road, which is in this case is the IRS and the people snitching on you, because the only way the IRS can come is someone confessed. Either you confess or the people you're doing business with snitch on you through the 1099 miscellaneous form or the W-2 form or other types of forms that are not generally available that usually start with the letter Z. What if they've acted erratically and there exists a preponderance of evidence on the record, like we went over in the 508, whereby there's a reasonable expectation in the record that you qualify for taxes? Meaning some form had to be filled out and some type of 9-digit identification number or the EIN or the social security number attaches to a certain algorithm of name, first and last, and a certain address that they can generate a ledger to say, hey, we see you based on these amounts in our calculation, you owe us some money. Pay up. Where do you think you're going? You thought you was going to escape? You didn't realize that they were very volatile and you actually got in the situation. You can still avoid it rather than evade.
Hey, I'm inviting you to come join the Patreon page. Not only do you get access to documents, posts, and videos that you will never find on any other platforms, you also get instant access to webinars that otherwise will cost far more. And we speak of things that usually we would not be able to speak of on any other platforms far more freely. On top of that, you get the opportunity to send me monthly questions.